to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 95 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 21 of A Clash of Kings, that's Bran 3.
And we're going to chat about the chapter, and we're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully, we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the TV show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll be particularly handy if you're not reading along with us. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm good.
So I have a story for you. So my cell phone plan, when I was signing up for it, they said, we can throw an extra cell phone in for free.
Yeah,
and I was like,
good.
What can I do? But then I was like, my mother-in-law, she could do with a smartphone. She only had a flip phone to that point, so we got her a low-end smartphone. And I tried to make it easy for her. I just put sort of like phone and messaging and Facebook and Sudoku on her front page.
Sure.
The only apps she has access to. And I thought, this is good. So she calls us the other day to say that she can't remember the password to get into the phone. Now, I wrote down a lot of things, but the password to get into the phone I thought she would use every day and so wouldn't need to be reminded of that one. But it's a sign perhaps of how often she's using the phone that she forgot. So I went over to her house and I took it and I was like, it's got to be your date of birth or something like that. So I kept trying combinations and eventually it had a countdown for sort of a factory reset. So
right, yeah.
Eventually I said, look, I'll take it home and think about it some more. I mean, obviously you can't use it like this. I'll just take it home and think about it. And when I got it home, first thing I tried, it worked. I was like, there you are, I got it. So I got in there. And so I was ready to take it back, but Carson had a look at the phone and she said, one thing I noticed about this phone, and there's sort of a backstory to this phone, we actually had another extra line on this plan,
wow.
which we were using as our home phone, but then my mother-in-law, somehow without using her phone, managed to lose her phone. And so we gave her our home phone and had the cell phone company switched the number from our home number to her number. So this phone became hers, but it was originally ours.
Yes.
And Carson noticed on the phone that all of my mother-in-law's contacts, I mean, she knows 10 people, but she had 700 contacts, and they were all my contacts.
Oh, boy.
So she was like, this is clearly not helping my mother-in-law to learn to use the phone. So Carson went in there, and actually, last time we were recording, while we were recording, she spent the whole time deleting contacts from this phone so that my mother-in-law would have only her own contacts.
Yes. Oh, no. I'm feeling I know where this is going now.
When we finished recording, I got a text from you, and it was from a number and not from Mackelly Ray anymore because Carson had scrupulously removed 690 of my 700 contacts from my phone.
Oh, no. That's funny, only in a tragic way.
I've accused her of trying to purge my ex-girlfriends.
Which were 340 of the 690.
Yes, exactly. So Carson's complaining about the hour and a half she spent removing those has a drop in the bucket compared to me putting those back in.
Oh, no. Oh, goodness, that is quite the situation. I was fearing this as the story was getting to the contact situation.
And I realised what it was. There's like a sync function on there. It was synced to my, and I've turned that off now so we can have separate lists. But
oh no, is there any backup system for that?
The thing was, she was deleting it from Google Contacts, so that's the backup. So she was eliminating it all. The thing is, I mean, like anyone who texted me, I could just remember who that was and just reapply the name to it. But
right,
I still got the text.
Reaching out to someone,
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely people I've lost forever now.
Oh goodness. Technology. Sometimes it's just,
I was looking at it, I was like, why do I only have my brother-in-law, my other brother-in-law, my other brother-in-law, and my 4 aunts-in-law? Why are the other people in my phone? I was like, I have a feeling I know.
I just fell out of my chair. I was laughing so hard at that. Well, I'm laughing at your misfortune, but you seem to be weathering it well, so that's good.
You know me. It's amazing I've discovered this so quickly, the amount I use my phone.
Yeah. I did text you yesterday evening, and the response came in about 15 minutes ago about recording right now.
Yeah. Well, look, I stick to my plan. You know, if the plan's in place, I'm sticking to it unless I let you know otherwise. All right. Well, we can ramble here because we don't have a very long chapter, but we should probably get down to business.
Yes, I think.
How did we leave Bran Stark? Last time we saw him, he was defending Hodor's honor against the Frey boys, sitting through audience after audience after audience with vassal lords or their proxies, more often than not, all of whom have an eye on the recently widowed Lady Hornwood, or at least on her lands. Finally, a mention of Jaime Lannister sent Bran into a tizzy, and that night he dreamt of a crow pecking a third eye into his forehead. Through that eye, he saw a golden man tossing him out of a window. Mackelly, why don't we give the summary of this one?
Bran rides Dancer through Winterfell's great hall to a chorus of cheers of Stark and Winterfell. For a minute, he gets swept up in the pageantry and forgets that he's broken. But when he reaches the high table and has to be helped off his horse by Osha and Hodor, he's reminded of his new limitations. The North is feasting, both in honor of the bounty from the harvest and for Robb's victories in the South. Bran sits in the high seat of his father's, now Robb's. Sir Roderick is seated to his left, and the ever-increasingly bedraggled Rickon sits to his right.
Bran welcomes all in attendance, and then they get down to some partying, northern style. Heaping plates of all manner of food are brought around, first to Bran, to take the Lord's choice, if he wishes, before being offered to the rest of those gathered. Bran was annoyed that the Frey boys are seated at the high table, but Sir Roderick pointed out that they'll be family soon, as Robb will marry one of their aunts, and Arya one of their uncles. Bran is more than sceptical of the latter happening.
That's for sure. Aren't we all? As Bran watches the merriment around him, he realizes that some of the faces are new to him and others are as familiar as his own, but regardless, he feels detached from them all. Bran finds himself sinking into a waking dream. It's another of his wolf dreams, where he's Summer, experiencing the sounds and smells of the Winterfell godswood. He's brought back to reality by a comment from Sir Roderick, but before long he's back off into a daydream. This time, he's remembering the feast in the same hall in honor of King Robert's arrival at Winterfell.
He recalls all of his family, apart from Jon, seated at the high table, his father in this very seat. Now they're all gone, captive, warring, at the wall, or dead. That sombre realization causes him to look around at the faces in the hall and wonder who else will be gone within the next year. The arrival of two guests shakes him from his dark thoughts. Meera and Jojen Reed have made the trek from the bogs of the Neck. Little Walder vocally disparages them as thieves and cravens with green teeth from eating frogs. The pair pledge their fealty to Bran and House Stark, and Bran welcomes them to Winterfell.
Bran doesn't know much about the crannogman from the Neck, but he recalls Howland Reed. The father of this pair was a close companion to his father Ned. Unfortunately, there's too much noise to chat with him and find out more. When the dancing and music begin, Bran retires to his bedroom. While lying in bed, Bran recalls a conversation he had with his father, that Sir Arthur Dayne was the greatest knight he'd ever seen, and that he would have killed Ned if not for Howland Reed.
Bran drifts off to sleep and dreams that he's Summer in the Godswood with Shaggy Dog. The wolves hear a noise and investigate. They find the Reed siblings, who also seem to be looking for the wolves. Sleeping Bran recognizes Meera. Jojen seems unafraid of the wolves, despite their growling and teeth-baring. He reaches out and touches Summer, and Bran's dream falls apart. He finds himself falling and falling.
Yeah.
do you want more stories of my cell phone?
It's another one of those chapters where there is an incredible amount of detail regarding food.
Yeah.
This chapter's like 11 or 12, maybe 14 pages long, and at least a quarter of it is description of food.
Yeah. And it sounds good and interesting, and certainly adds colour to the whole thing. I mean, the book needs this. It's just not as easy to discuss because, I mean, apart from this is not a great choice of words, but regurgitating the food.
On the Discord server this week, we were discussing whether the food and clothing descriptions that could feel excessive at times. If you enjoy them, do you find them part of the world building, or do they just get in the way? And I think unanimously we agreed that they have a place. They are part of the world building and the scene setting, and they make it feel more real. But yes, it doesn't exactly lend itself to podcast gold here.
Yeah.
Although one of our listeners, who goes by the handle of Muzzy Gee, suggested that we, for our 100th episode, we try making some of the food that's mentioned in the book.
Yes, I'm not sure about that. It's an interesting idea.
I said I'd leave the lampreys to you. But so Dancer and Jothis gets a mention in this chapter, and just a reminder, Dancer wears that special saddle of Tyrion's design.
Dancer is a horse of sorts, right?
Yes, a horse.
Yeah, okay, yes,
not so much of sorts, straight up a horse.
Straight up a horse.
Tyrion, when he came to visit Winterfell on his way back from Castle Black, he gave Bran, remember, Jon asked Tyrion to help Bran in some way, and so he came, when he visited, he gave him instructions for creating a saddle that would allow him to ride, and Dancer is trained to respond to touch, sound, and the reins more so than just leg pressure. And that Joseph mentioned in an earlier Bran chapter that Dancer is smarter than any horse has a right to be. So I guess that's good.
Yeah, is it because Dancer is smart, or is it because the clever saddle design gives him a method of communication with its rider that other horses don't have,
I think Tyrion's instructions were a very smart horse and an unbroken horse. So that a horse that hasn't already been trained in normal, average saddle riding. So, yeah. But we also get a Rickon sighting.
Very good.
And he is very wild and shaggy. Pretty much like Shaggy.
Yes.
Like his dog, Shaggy Dog. Apparently, he's not let anyone cut his hair since his mother left. And the last girl that tried to cut his hair was bitten. And at first, I thought that it was Shaggy that bit the girl. And then I realized, no, it was Rickon.
Honestly, probably for the best of the two.
Yeah.
But I wonder if Rickon could fit in the modern world, the pandemic haircut he's developed.
Right. Yeah, he would blend right in.
Well, certainly nobody would notice him.
No, that's right. He'd be left out of all head counts, as he frequently is.
Yeah, one thing, and I'll give Mackelly credit for this, for noticing this actually, is that this chapter follows straight on the back of the last Tyrion chapter, which was not all about, but focused quite heavily on the starvation rations that are pervading King's Landing now, and how the people are really suffering there. And now we split to this really. I'm surprised by how lavish this feast is, given that this is the North. I would have thought their feast would have been like 3 courses, of which one was bread. But it really is a lavish feast. So there's that contrast between the gold wealth of the Lannisters and the perhaps land and real wealth of the Starks.
Sure, yeah, and the feast, which I agree was surprisingly lavish, especially with winter coming and them not having the hands to harvest everything that they wanted to harvest, and not putting enough grain aside, as we learned in the last Bran chapter, from a lot of the houses. Looking at you, Glovers. But in other ways, it was very...
I like the idea the Glovers are not at the high table and they're not getting as much food as everybody else as a punishment.
Yeah. A 10th? Who puts aside a 10th? In other ways, it was very Stark-like, where the lords and the small folk were all feasting together. The heir to the crown was doling out fancy dishes to commoners like Joseph and Hodor and Nan. In one way, it was unexpectedly lavish, and the other way, it was very Stark-like.
of course, it is. I mean, it has precedent in our world. I think harvest festivals where people have a sort of like a hearty meal are quite common, or in more primitive times here, because you can't preserve all that food, and so right at that moment of the harvest, you have the most you'll ever have. So, and honestly, putting on a layer of fat for the winter is not such a bad idea,
Good point.
Especially an 8-year winter, you'll want a good layer of blubber for that.
Yeah, they're all going to be a few pounds lighter by the end of.
Like polar bears,
Right. Yeah, pack it on early.
So Bran didn't really want the Freys at the high table. They basically annoy Bran. They annoy me too, actually. I've got a few gripes against the Freys coming up, but and in the summary, we've just realised that I accidentally said it was Sir Roderick that insisted the Freys be at the high table, but it was actually Maester Luwin. The reason being that they will soon be kin. Rob's going to marry one of their aunts, and Arya's going to marry one of their uncles. Bran is rightly sceptical about this outcome. There are no winners in that.
No, there's not.
Arya does not want that, and whoever that poor Frey uncle is will be like, I do not want this girl.
Right. Yeah, it's part of this whole Stark Frey pact that I think often is forgotten about, at least by me anyway, that not only Robb is going to marry a Frey, which has been brought up a few times, but that Arya too, she might be better off being at the wall. She might prefer to become
I saw that in the notes, and I wasn't sure if you meant Arya at the wall or her future husband.
Yes. I think both might prefer to be at the wall. If yearn had survived and had gotten her to the wall, she might enjoy that more than marriage at the moment. Anyway, she's just a little girl.
Yeah,
plenty of little kids don't want to be married.
I will say that we may forget that pact, but I'll bet my bottom dollar that there is one person who has not forgotten that pact, and that is Walder Frey.
Oh, yes.
He knows every word of that contract, and he intends to get every part of it he asked for.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's got that, he might be old, but he's still got a sharp mind, so he's not going to let that slip, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So Bran's, he's sitting there having his meal. He gets stuffed pretty quick because they offer him the Lord's choice right off the bat, and by the time the description says by the time they make it to the duck, he's already stuffed to bursting, basically. So he's pretty much just sitting there watching the feast unfold, and he notices new faces and familiar faces, but he feels distant from all of them regardless, and he thinks that it's like he's still sitting in his window. He's seeing everything, but he's not a part of everything, and I get that. It's probably a multi-layered thing. Certainly his physical limitations are a factor. He can't participate in the dancing, which hasn't happened yet at this point in the chapter, but he's separate in that regard. He's the only paraplegic in the room, but also he's taken on a new role. He's no longer just a boy who can run around and play and misbehave and all that kind of thing. He's now King Robb's heir, and he's got grown-up responsibilities, and he has an appearance that he has to portray, and he's sitting at the high table, so all eyes are on him, and you just get this, when you're in that position, there's no peers to commiserate with or relate to. You're just kind of, you're alone in this position, and
I do wonder, actually, though, if there is a sort of like a slight cancellation of these things, because he literally can't do anything but sit around, and he's being asked to sit around, and maybe for a 9-year-old, it's easier for a 9-year-old who is unable to walk to sit around.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, that's a very thin silver lining on a very dark cloud in his life, but
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, he's at this point better suited to do this job than he would have been,
right?
If he could have gone and participated in all the action that was going on in the yard last chapter, he would have been extra annoyed to have to sit and listen to all his bannermen come and have meetings with him.
Although then again, I wonder if those bannermen might have been willing to meet him in the yard, knowing that he was a young lord who wanted to be in the yard. They might have come and
Oh. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
They may expect the courtesy, but he's 9 years old, meet him on his terms kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I could see that. Well, some of the folks in attendance here at the feast, there's not a whole lot of interaction. It's mostly just Bran's thoughts. He only has a handful of conversations. But Wyman Manderley is mentioned. He's mentioned attacking food like it's an enemy on the battlefield. But it's also he's described as laughing often, and he does dance with little Beth Cassell for a few minutes anyway.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes.
And Lady Donella Hornwood's there, of course. She's wan. Her face is a stony mask. She's picking listlessly at her food. She's next to Wyman Manderley, is that right?
Yeah, she's seated next to Wyman Manderley, which
right.
I wondered if the seating chart is a sign of possible favoritism from the Stark brain trust here.
Yeah,
and maybe.
Although this brain trust did say it was not going to make a decision, but yes, it might be sort of like tipping its hand a little bit with this seating arrangement.
Yes, and I wondered if possibly. Now I know she's bereaving, but also she mentioned specifically that she was not interested in Wyman Manderley. Like, the only person she specifically called out was Wyman Manderley. So maybe that's why she's stony, has a stony face on and picking listlessly at her food. Is like,
yes,
is this supposed to mean something?
that does explain your comment in the notes about why she looks so unhappy. I'm like, have you forgotten that she's just recently bereaved and lost her son? Yeah. Yes,
definitely that would also cause her to to be wan. But
yes.
I wondered, the whole seating chart thing, they could have sat her anywhere they sat her, but they also are cousins, I believe we discovered last chapter. So maybe it's just a relative thing. Oh, and the Umbers also get a mention. They're just like they were last chapter. They're loud and boisterous, and they're drinking heavily. And if the seating chart is a potential match thing, they either haven't noticed or they don't seem upset by it because they're having a grand old time.
The booze is flowing. The Umbers will be happy.
Right.
I see the Umbers as a sort of slightly older version of the Freys, and also slightly nicer as well. Just like much more easygoing. The Freys are just kind of there's a mean streak to those two Freys, which.
Yes, there is.
Osha's right about them.
Yes, she was.
So while Bran's sitting there feeling apart from the rest, he falls into a daydream, and it's his wolf dream again, where he basically is in the Godwoods, and he's seeing and hearing and feeling what summer senses. So it's interesting that he's developing that ability. I mean, it's not. It doesn't feel like it's a conscious choice, but it is something he's now doing in his day while awake as well as while he's asleep.
Right. Yeah, it seems like possibly a progression from actually sleeping to basically a waking dream here, as he calls it. And I wondered if it could be related to that third eye that the crow pecked into his head last chapter. Maybe that's some sort of new development. Oh, although he does, the dream the dream ends when Roderick mentions that he's not eating. And I thought maybe it wasn't a wolf dream at all, because he did mention in the description mentions his brother howling at the moon. And I thought, well, that could be Rickon too. It wouldn't surprise me. So maybe he was just thinking about how it's cooler in the godswood than it is here.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally that each of these Bran chapters, we see his special abilities, whatever they might be, evolving just slightly each time. And you're right, this is one of the examples here. And I like the fact that you've tied it back to that pecking of the third eye, which really happened. I mean, that's been threatened for several dreams, and now it really happened in the last one, and now he's able to do this while awake. So
right,
yeah, he's moving on. Where it will lead, I don't know, but he is moving forward with it.
It looks like it.
Yeah. Bran mentions that he's drinking from a ceremonial goblet. The last time he saw which was in his father's hand when they welcomed King Robert to Winterfell. And he thinks back to that night. In fact, it is the goblet that sort of triggers this memory, but then he's sort of like, he starts to daydream about this now as well. He remembers how all of his family were gathered that night, including Jon and Uncle Benjen, although Jon was at a distant table, if you remember, because of Cat's mean seating arrangements. And now he's only left with Rickon. And it's not just the family that have gone, though. All the people that Ned took to King's Landing were characters from Bran's childhood, and none of them are coming back, you know.
Right.
He mentions Septa Mordane, Varen Poole, Jory Cassell.
Yeah. It's his recollection is basically Jon 1 from A Game of Thrones, just from Bran's perspective instead of Jon's. And he even includes Marcella's adoring gaze at Robb, and I believe Jon referred to it as insipid in his version of the events. But he thinks that they're all dead, and in some cases he's definitely right. Arya saw Desmond dying, and she found Howland dead when during the sack of the Tower of the Hand by the Lannisters. But some we've just not heard from. Vaon Poole, he's likely dead. Remember, that's Jane Poole's father. And when Sansa was talking to Cersei about Jane Poole being reunited with her father, it didn't seem like a reunion was likely to happen there.
As I read that book, I heard sort of nervous throat clearing and shuffling of feet.
Yes.
I'm not sure that's actually what happened, but that's certainly what I was hearing in my inner mind. You know?
Right. I think Grand Maester Pycelle was feeling that way. He refused to look up from the table. But Alan and Harwin, they went off with Beric Dondarrion, so it's possible they're dead, but it's also possible they're not dead. We don't know. If
rumors are to be believed, they are dead multiple times over, but still going strong.
Yes. And then he mentions Porther. We last saw him in King's Landing, and we haven't heard from him since, so he's also likely dead, or he's just escaped and hiding out in King's Landing. But we don't know about him.
So this whole chapter is sort of like just a continuation of the last chapter. I mean, we met the people who were in this feast in the last chapter, and we actually talked to them a little bit because Bran, basically welcomed them all to Winterfell. And now it's the feast to further welcome them all, but without the conversation. So, but fortunately, there is a little bit of action because the events are punctuated by the arrival of the Reeds. Meera is about 16 years old and Jojen is around 13. The Frey boys are their usual selves and refer to them as mudmen and frog eaters. They are a couple of inbred little weasels. I mean, obviously, I shouldn't name call because they're name calling, but I feel the need to.
Yeah, although it was actually only Little Walter who was saying the negative things.
Oh, yeah.
So he definitely seems like a turd in general.
Yeah, which one did
it was Little Walter that she said was big on the outside, little on the inside. So, like you said, she's right about him.
Yeah.
But the specific comments, to me, it seemed likely that he didn't make these observations himself. It seemed more like it was something he had heard or was told about crannogman from others in his family.
Oh, yeah.
And if geographically, the twins in the neck are fairly close neighbors, so likely there is some interactions. And based on the oath that the Reeds give here, and the fact that Howland Reed was close friends with Ned Stark, it seems that likely they have very different family cultures. And the power-hungry, mean-spirited nature of the Frey's leadership is different than the Reed leadership. And one thing that I've known to be universally true is that with all companies or any culture, the culture starts at the top. So I'm not entirely surprised that there's a dislike and possible bad blood here.
Yeah. And I think you raise a good point as well about this not being little Walder's thought. This is being regurgitated. I think that's true of pretty much any child spouting prejudice. They got that from somewhere else.
Right.
Prejudice is not innate,
Right. Yeah. But I doubt he spent a whole lot of time interacting with crannogman to see whether they have green teeth or not.
Although, I mean, I guess this really is prejudice in the sense of sort of like it being based purely on ignorance, because you get the feeling that the crannogmen are pretty secretive and don't actually interact. I think Bran mentions during this chapter that he's never seen one before. He's never met one before. Even though they are, liege, the Starks are their liege lords, they don't send emissaries. They don't seem to come out of the marsh very often. They must have some trade, and like you said, that could well be with the Freys, because that's one of the most significant neighbouring families. But one gets the sense that there isn't an awful lot of interaction between the Reeds and others. They basically keep to themselves. That being said, the people of the North, Bran and company, definitely treat the Reeds with respect and courtesy. They're given a space on the high table, and the oath that they pledge is clearly quite serious and significant.
Yeah. We'll get to that in a minute, but go on to what you were going to talk about their presence being unusual here. Oh no, you were going to talk about their description.
Yes. So, to mention both of them, they are slight of build, both of them. The Reeds, not the Freys. They're not.
Not so much.
And they are. I'm guessing that it's probably handy to be slight if you live in a swamp, so you don't sink like a stone. That would be one reason to not get lardy.
I thought the description of Jojen Reed reminded me a little bit of Peter Pan, because Bran describes him being dressed head to toe, even the leather in his boots are green. And he also has green eyes. So
I can see that.
He's got quite the color theme going on here.
And there is a connection there, actually, because the kid who plays Jojen Reed in the TV show is in a movie about Peter Pan.
Oh, well, looky there.
Yeah, look at that. No, he doesn't play Peter Pan. He plays one of the children.
Oh, okay. But still, yes, I get it. Huh?
Oh, you know what? I'm mixing up two movies. I don't think that's true.
Oh.
Oh, well. Let's just keep it in there as if it's the truth.
Right. But so Bran overhears little Walder talking about how they're frog eaters and they have green teeth and all that stuff. And first of all, I thought, are frogs any worse than lamprey? Like, I probably would eat a frog leg over eating a lamprey.
I have eaten frog's legs. They're fine.
Yeah.
And certainly you don't turn your teeth green, because the meat looks like it's chicken coloured. It's not green.
It's not going to turn your teeth green.
That would be off-putting if it was bright green.
But so he asks Roderick, who's sitting next to him, and he mentions basically it's so loud in there, the only people you can talk to are those sitting next to you. And he asks, do they really eat frogs? And Roderick says, yep, they eat frogs, they eat fish, they eat a lot of different fowl. And Bran astutely says maybe they eat frogs and fowl because there's no sheep, or they don't have access to sheep or cattle. And I thought, just like right before that, Roderick says, you're going to make an especially fine lord someday. And I thought, this is a great example of that, because he has the wherewithal at his age to recognize that a lot of times people are different from you and have different customs from you because they don't have access to the same things that you have access to, and vice versa.
Yes,
and
people evolve to their environment, yeah.
Yes, recognizing that as an 8-year-old, I thought was especially astute, and I agree he would make an especially fine lord someday with that kind of observation.
Yeah. Also, there's a little bit of romance in the air here, because at one point, Bran catches Meera's eyes, and they look at each other for a second, and then Bran blushes and looks away, sort of thing. So, I mean, I remember being 9, 16-year-old girls were very interesting.
Right, yes, for sure. Now, the other way, probably not quite the same.
No, God, no. That was never reciprocated.
No. Me either.
I think there was a window of about 2 weeks in my life when 16-year-old girls were interested in me. It passed in the blink of an eye. Jojen, after the formal greeting, his first line is, "Where are the direwolves?" So obviously, I mean, he's a kid too. He's excited to meet the direwolves. I also think it's a very endearing thing to say to the owner of the direwolves. You know,
yes.
If you own a direwolf and the first thing someone says is, "Can I meet the direwolf?" that makes you feel good about yourself. Yes.
Yeah, it's Bran's special thing that he has. He's got a direwolf. Only a handful of people in this world, all his siblings, have a direwolf.
I mean, he's got other things. You could say, "Hey, will you jump on Hodor's shoulders for me?" That one, less endearing.
Right, yes. Good point. Well, I found their oath to be both unusual and curious. It seems like they give an obligation to the liege lord for continued support on their part in their oath. When they say, as long as you do right by those who pay fealty to you, we'll continue to pay fealty to you. There's almost like there's a contract there that we will continue to do this for the thousands of years like we've done, as long as you continue to support us.
I think obviously very few people state that, but I think that should be implicit in all of these oaths. I mean, you're pledging fealty. You need to get something from it. I mean, you're paying some kind of taxes up to them, and you're offering to send your people to fight when called upon to do so. Well, you better get something for those things. I mean,
agreed.
Unless it's just a protection racket, you know. You'd like to think there was something in it for the lesser lords too.
Yes, it's just not often stated that way. And obviously we see examples such as maybe in places like King's Landing, where high lords feel no obligation to protect their small folk, and I'm looking at you, Joffrey Baratheon.
First and hopefully last of his name.
Yes. And also, they don't mention the old gods and the new. They swear to all kinds of things. They swear to all physical things, actually. They swear to earth and water, bronze and iron, and ice and fire. But there's no, I swear to the old gods and the new. Nothing like that. No religious element at all, which I also thought was curious.
Yeah. Yeah, they're an interesting addition in terms of the sort of like the nature of people, because they are obviously not like the other northern families, but there is obviously a very strong bond between the Starks and the Reeds. Perhaps, I mean, obviously the oath mentions the thousands of years, but you only have to go back one generation to find a reaffirming of that bond. If Howland Reed really saved Ned from being killed by Arthur Dayne, then that's a
very true.
Bran owes his very existence to it.
Right, yep, because he even mentions it was before I was born.
Right.
So if not for Howland Reed, he wouldn't have been born.
Yeah. So the dancing is fun and very wild and makes Bran want to leave because he can't join in.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes. Yeah, Roderick made his move, took the rejection.
On Lady Hornwood?
Yes. Yes, he approaches Lady Hornwood, presumably about dancing, because that's what's going on at the time, and Bran said she made her excuses and left, and, Roderick seemed, when she made a slight pass at him in the last chapter when she suggested that he should throw his own hat into the ring for her new husband. He kind of downplayed that, like, no, I'm too old and that wouldn't work. But maybe as he was sitting here, he thought, well, I'm not that old.
Yeah, I've had a few.
So he made his move, but unfortunately it didn't work out. And that happens.
This also makes me think of my attempts to meet 16-year-old girls. There was a lot of that. A lot of rejection. So Bran heads off to bed. We're skipping over the fact that on the way back to bed, on Hodor's shoulders, they see Joseph, the master of horse, engaged in carnal acts with an unidentified lady, which to Hodor's great interest, and Bran is forced to get him to focus on the job of hand of taking him back to bed. But Hodor's ready to stay and watch, basically.
Yeah, I was thinking Joseph had quite the evening. He had the High Lord at the table send him a huge lobster, which we also didn't talk about, but I think we mentioned in the summary that Bran was sending out food to various people. He's supposed to be sending them to other lords, but he's 8-year-old. He was sending them to his friends, and he sent stuff to Hodor and Nan and Joseph. And so Joseph had a very nice big lobster, and now he's
yes. I know what he's doing. I know precisely what he's doing. So Bran gets to bed, and as he falls asleep, he remembers what his father said because when he meets the Reeds, he remembers there was some kind of connection with his father, but he couldn't remember precisely what it was. But as he's falling asleep, it comes back to him that but for Howland Reed, the Arthur Dayne would have killed him. Bran regrets never asking his father to explain actually what he meant by that. What was the nature of the saving? So he, that information is obviously gone. Although presumably Howland Reed still knows it.
Right. Yes. You would think so. We haven't met him yet, but unless his memory was incredibly shaky.
Right.
Well,
I saved Ned Stark. I remember that. But the thought about Arthur Dayne is actually presaged by Bran asking his father, remembering back to this conversation, if the Kingsguard are the best swordsmen in the land. And Ned's reply was that they used to be, and at the time of Arthur Dayne, they clearly were, and Arthur Dayne was the best of them all. But basically, you get a sense from that conversation that Ned was a little bit disdainful of the Kingsguard even before he went to King's Landing. And I'm interested to know what's your opinion on this? Whether that stems from just his antagonism toward Jaime Lannister, or is it more of a sort of general contempt of the rest of them? I mean, because they were still headed up by Barristan Selmy at that point, and we know Ned had a lot of respect for Barristan Selmy.
Right.
So
yes, it certainly would be heavily tainted by Jaime Lannister. Not even just the fact that he is a Lannister and therefore would not be so much liked by Ned, because we get a sense in chapter 2, the first Cat chapter, that he doesn't like the Lannisters because they arrived late to the party of Robert's Rebellion. But also, I think as much as it helped Robert's Rebellion to be successful, that Jaime Lannister killed King Aerys, I think Ned also takes his vows very seriously, and him killing the king as a sworn member of the Kingsguard also probably very much tarnished his reputation in Ned's eyes. But, if he knew Boris Blunt and Sir Mandon Moore, for example, he would know they're not the shining stars that they used to be, the Kingsguard, I mean.
That doesn't mean they're not handy swordsmen, of course.
No, it doesn't, right. But, as far as we know, the 3 Kingsguard that he fought at the Tower of Joy, they were guarding a kidnapped and, according to Robert, frequently raped young woman. So, they weren't necessarily practicing the best.
Right. But again, you got to take your pick and choose here. I mean, if you want them to hold to their vows, then they've got to do it no matter how badly he's treating her.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Although again, as I've said several times about the Tower of Joy, there was nobody royal in that tower.
True.
Kingsguard did not have to guard that tower. They were perhaps given a command, but it wasn't within their vows, I don't think.
As far as we know, there was nobody royal in that tower.
Right.
But so just a quick reminder, back in Ned 10, Ned dreamed of the fight at the Tower of Joy with Sir Arthur Dayne and Oswell Went, but also the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Sir Gerald Hightower, was there as well. And then in Cat 2, she was thinking about the rumors that Ned killed Arthur Dayne in single combat, and then brought the sword Dawn, which gets a mention in this chapter, to Starfall to give to Ashara Dane, and that there's been rumors that Ashara Dane is Jon's mom.
Right.
What do you call him? A bachelorette?
Bachelorette Westeros, yes.
Candidate.
So, well, one thing you said there, of course, which I think we can now discount, is that Ned killing Arthur Dane in single combat is perhaps not true, because clearly Howland Reed saved him. Now, maybe he saved him weeks in advance of that, but it feels like the fight was not just Ned against Arthur Dane.
Or maybe Howland Reed distracted Arthur Dane, like doing a dance or something that got his attention for a second and just gave Ned the window he needed.
Right. Yes.
It's possible.
So the Reeds are brave to the point of foolhardiness to go visit the wolves. And
I thought that same thing.
Right. I think they are perhaps lucky that Bran and Summer merge when he sleeps, because Bran probably wouldn't shoot Jojen's arm off in the same way that Summer might without any prompting.
Right. Yes.
And I think Summer is kind of the boss of Shaggy Dog, and that kind of helps as well.
Yeah, that's what Bran mentioned, that he would protect them against Shaggy Dog.
Yeah.
Summer would protect the Reeds against Shaggy Dog.
Yeah. Jojen appears to have some intuition about the wolves. He seems to be able to read their thoughts. Meera, on the other hand, cannot. He says that the black one is full of fear and rage, and the grey one is stronger than he knows. So that's Shaggy is full of fear and rage. Yes, we can get that. And the grey one is stronger than he knows. That's Bran. That's Summer. So
yeah,
we know that these two wolves are totems and spirit animals of their owners, and that seems to fit. What is Bran's additional strength? To be discovered, I guess, but presumably it's to do with what he's dreaming about.
Yes, it certainly seems like Jojen has something going on there as far as intuition, because he also says, "This is not the day I die."
Right.
So he could just be saying that, like, no. I'm good. This is not the day I die.
I say that every time I go up for a header at soccer. This is not the day I die. Eventually, I'll be wrong.
Yeah, he could just been braggadocio, but it seemed like there was something more going on there. Now Meera's response could have been, "Yeah, but it might be the day you lose an arm."
They have good maesters here who might keep you alive until tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
But he is able to approach and stroke Summer, and at his touch, as Jojen touches Summer, that breaks the connection between Bran and Summer, and he's back into his falling dream again. Was that something? Yeah. Go on, you ask the questions that you want to ask here.
Is it something about Jojen that broke the connection, or just an effect of the dream, really, I mean, like I said, there seems like there's something going on with Jojen. We didn't get a whole lot of info from him, but he seemed very much, from the very get-go, his main objective was seeing the direwolves. Now, he's a 13-year-old boy, 15-year-old, 16-year-old girl. They both would probably be very much interested in seeing the direwolves because they're cool. But, that's the very first thing they did by themselves, go out and seek these direwolves. Is there something going on there? Possible.
Yeah. One possible thought is, if Jojen has some sort of insight into the wolves, in somewhat the same way that Bran does. Bran can inhabit Summer, but Jojen could read their thoughts. He could understand their characters just by looking at them. Maybe he has some of the same abilities, and when he touched, he sort of displaced Bran.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. I was thinking about the fact that Bran's wolf dreams are much more lucid than his crow or falling dreams. They feel very real and concrete versus
I think they are. I think Summer is really doing the things that he's seeing.
Yeah. The falling dreams and the crow dreams are a lot of metaphor heavy and a lot of crazy things that don't necessarily make a lot of sense. But the wolf dreams they feel like a real situation going on.
And that could also be the reason for the break. Maybe once Summer makes connection with another real person, that throws out the spirit. That those two things can't coexist,
Sure.
Anyway, to background.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about House Reed, shall we, and the crannogman of the neck. In a couple of Ned chapters in A Game of Thrones, we told you that Howland Reed is the Lord of Greywater Watch, which is built on a floating island, or a crannog, in the swamps south of Moat Cailin. We mentioned that it can't be found by outsiders or ravens, as it moves from place to place. We know, obviously, that Howland Reed was with Ned at the Tower of Joy when Lyanna died. But it's also said that he hasn't left the neck since Robert's Rebellion, and that goes back to what you were saying, that the crannogmen don't seem to get out a lot, apparently. That's true of their lord. He hasn't been out in 16 years or something. Well, we've unfortunately only got semi-canon info on House Reed's sigil, but it's said to be a black lizard lion on gray-green, and the tail of the lizard lion curls back over its body, almost making a circle, and their words have yet to be mentioned in the story, so I unfortunately can't tell you what they are.
I actually know what they are. It's "Take That, Kermit." It's not.
That could be. It's no, you don't think? Okay. No. So, like you mentioned, crannogmen are generally small in stature, and in this chapter, Bran mentions that Meera and Jojen are about his size, and he's 8. So, and in Ned 10 of A Game of Thrones, he describes Howland as a small man as well. And it's said that the crannogmen were close to the children of the forest back in the day, and that some believe their small stature is due to inbreeding between the two during that time. Others just put it down to poor nutrition, so, I guess just depends on your perspective. Yeah. Meera mentions that her people have pledged fealty to the Starks for thousands of years. She mentions that when she starts their oath. And their allegiance to the Starks began when King Rickard Stark, otherwise known as the Laughing Lion, and not to be confused with Bran's grandfather, Rickard Stark, he killed the last of the Marsh Kings and took his daughter as wife. And actually, that was mentioned, it was quickly referenced in Bran 7 when they were down in the crypts, and he was going through some of the ancient kings.
Comparison with a television show. This part is becoming increasingly difficult to piece together, especially around Bran, because the Bran scenes don't seem to fit exactly with the chapters. Partly because Bran's story doesn't have much of a narrative arc at the moment. He's just in a holding pattern.
Right.
I don't remember any feast at Winterfell. Bran continues to have these dreams. Meera and Jojen Reed don't appear for many more episodes. I don't think they actually appear until season 4. In fact.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I could describe their arrival at the TV show, but it would include spoilers, so basically none of this happens.
Oh, well, that's a comparison. Yeah. All right.
Pedantry Corner. Not to be pedantic, but if Wyman Manderley cannot ride a horse, I'm quite surprised to see him up and dancing. Yes. I guess no animals were harmed when he dances versus when he rides a horse, although Beth Cassell might be in some danger. Should he stumble?
You can see Roderick was chewing his nails the whole time. Oh, that's my baby.
I'm going to go dance with Lady Homewood just so I don't have to watch this.
Yeah. No, Bran did mention that he didn't dance for very long. Right. So maybe it was just a few steps and then he was done.
I also have another one. This is a very minor one, but Meera's clothes are described. And Meera's clothes, she lives in a swamp, but she is wearing lambskin breeches. And I would have expected swampy type animal pelts, beaver, say, or perhaps snakeskin of some sort might be the thing you would have.
That would be neat. Snakeskin pants. She'd roll up looking like an 80s hairband rocker.
Exactly. Jute is a crop that is not dissimilar to cotton, and you can make clothes from it, and it grows in wet areas, so that would be a material that you could use as well. So it just seemed a bit odd, and certainly given that we think that sheep would not thrive in the swamp, they would drown, in fact, then having lambskin breeches does prove that they do trade outside.
Sure, yeah. I like the observation.
It's only mild pedantry, because obviously they could trade for it. It just seems a bit strange.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. Yeah, this isn't pedantry, but Ned.
No, this is solid pedantry. This is solid pedantry. I'm giving you credit. Yeah.
Okay.
This is solid pedantry.
There are ways to get them there, but so Bran remembers that He's never met Howland Reed or any crannogman, but he knows that Ned used to send letters to Howland Reed. And I thought, the crannogman must have a post office box somewhere outside of the neck, because it's thought that neither outsiders nor ravens can find Greywater Watch. So I'm not sure how he got I guess you could give the letters to someone who does have some knowledge of crannogmen, like a specific post-delivery person that knows a little bit of crannogmen.
You're absolutely right. Any kind of secret location is hard to communicate with. You've caused your own problems, yeah. But yes, there are ways around it, but it is worthy of note.
All right. Good. I'm glad you approve.
News and notes, what do you got for us?
Well, wait, another Game of Thrones spinoff appears to have a writer on board. HBO is said to have given Amanda Siegel the captain seat of the project 10,000 Ships. You see what I did there? Captain seat.
Oh, very good.
Ships.
Yeah.
Yes, the show is expected to depict Princess Nymeria and her Rhoynar as they make their way from Essos as refugees and eventually land in Dorne. Siegel was co-executive producer of Hulu's Hellstrom, and she's worked on Person of Interest, The Good Wife, Stephen King's The Mist, and Skull and Bones.
Yeah, interesting.
Little progress there. Now, I'm just gonna sit back and let you read this review, because I don't. Have you read it yet? Have you peeked ahead?
I've glanced over it, and I know it's going to make me. I'm going to choke up at various points. So, this review is from Podchaser.com. It's from a listener called Rob Hatton, and I don't think we've had any interaction with Rob. Right? This is out of the blue. I
did receive an email from him, which was also very nice, and it mentioned that he left this review, so I went and checked it out.
Great. I discovered this show after catching up with some other, more established podcasts on A Song of Ice and Fire, and was left hungry for more. Upon stumbling across the Ghost of Harrenhal, I was invited to a feast of such generous proportions as to be worthy of King Robert himself. Simon and Mackelly are dedicated in their efforts to bring you everything you need to know about the A Song of Ice and Fire books and the world in which they are set, with their humorous banter and great working chemistry enriching the whole experience. Their opening chit-chat is a welcome bonus, and you feel a part of camaraderie as you listen to them catch up with each other about everyday life before plunging into the current chapter with energy and enthusiasm. They dissect the chapter and provide insight on the motives and actions of each character, all without giving away spoilers for those who've not read the books. After this, Mackelly provides some diligent background research on names and places which may have been mentioned in the chapter, while Simon will point out some of the things that about the writing which may not make a great deal of sense in his pedantry corner, as well as comparing the books to the Game of Thrones TV show. Overall, I cannot recommend this podcast enough to anyone interested in either A Song of Ice and Fire or a Game of Thrones. Simon and Mackelly make revisiting Westeros a pleasure. Thank you, Rob. That's very, very nice.
Thank you, Rob. Man,
yeah,
I don't think...
Normally, when I say the words "thank you, Rob" on this podcast, it's to my brother and it's sarcastic.
Yes.
But this is genuine "thank you, Rob" to a nice person.
Yes. I don't think, even if I had sat down to try and write a review for ourselves, I don't think I could have been this glowing. This was fantastic. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Yeah, we really appreciate that. I
was beaming ear to ear while Simon was reading that.
So let's draw a line under this one. So the previous Bran chapter we complained was a bit of a dud, just a series of interviews with Stark Bannerman. And this chapter is a little bit more of the same, and actually kind of worse in some respects, because at least we got to meet those characters in the last chapter. This time they're just sitting around eating and not talking. They're basically just wallpaper to Bran's musings, and Bran's musings aren't that interesting.
No, it definitely wasn't a banner chapter here. But hey, hopefully we made it more interesting for our listeners.
Yeah, we blathered on.
Bran's doing a solid job so far as Lord of Winterfell, as expected, as the son of Ned Stark.
And a man grown.
Right, yes, he's 8. He's a man grown by now, certainly.
One thing actually I mentioned in this chapter is that he is actually the heir to Winterfell. I mean, Robb is king of the North, but should anything happen to Robb, and he is at war... Bran would be the king of the North, so beginning to bone up on these tasks is probably not a bad idea, just in case.
Absolutely, yeah. They need to wrap him in the bubble stuff to keep him safe.
Or lambskin or snakeskin or something.
Yeah, they've got Rickon. They've got a
yes,
a second backup. So
shaggy-haired fallback.
Yes. 4-year-old fallback.
Winterfell is feasting whilst King's Landing starves.
Yeah, that's quite the contrast.
Yeah.
The fact that these chapters were back-to-back, I don't think was accidental.
No,
I think
yeah.
They wanted to show that right now there's a major difference in the situation going on.
Yep. The arrival of the Starks is news. The Starks clearly owe the Reeds, and the Reeds in turn have a very great interest in these direwolves. And Bran, I think, is interested in them. They come across as nicer and more likable than the Freys, which is not difficult.
Not at all. No. Mm-hmm. Like we discussed at the end of our general discussion, it's possible that Jojen might have some powers that coincide with Bran. It just felt like there was something going on there. He made a few comments, and Bran mentioned, we haven't discussed this, but Bran mentioned that Jojen stared at him the whole... Now, of course, they were giving up an oath of fealty to him, so I guess it makes sense, but Bran specifically mentioned that Jojen stared at him the whole time, never breaking eye contact, so might be something going on there.
Yep.
It's possible that the dream that Bran had, where Meera and Jojen starred in it, or were guest stars, I guess, could have just been based on the fact that he met them today and they made an impression on him.
Oh, you think they're not in the godswood stroking the wolves?
I'm saying it's possible it could just be a dream. He could just been dreaming that he was Summer and he met Meera and Jojen because he met Meera and Jojen in real life tonight, and he was intrigued by them. But if not, if they were in the godswood, then these wolf dreams are taking on an entirely different thing. They're not necessarily dreams at all. He's literally going into Summer's body then if they actually did have this interaction.
Yeah. It is an unusually upbeat chapter. We've not had much fun for any of the characters. I mean, unless you count like the fun of escaping certain death. I mean,
right. It's fun of watching an execution.
Right. So yeah, this is the first sort of merriment chapter since Ned Seven of Game of Thrones, when he went to the tourney with Sansa and enjoyed the feast.
Yeah, that chapter ended with not so positive conversation with Varys about how nobody was looking out for Robert.
Yeah.
So even that chapter had some downsides to it, and this. I think there's underneath the fun and madness. There's all madness. I think underneath the fun and merriment, there's also some sadness and melancholy going on here. Bran certainly feels apart from the rest, and he misses his family, and he wonders who else is going to be gone from his life within the next year.
Yeah.
So,
and Rickon's misery is pretty clear to everyone, and Lady Hornwood is not cheering anyone up.
No, she's not. So as much as there was fun and merriment, there was also an undercurrent of sadder things, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter at @ghostharrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Discord.
And hey, if you wouldn't mind going out and leaving us a 5-star rate or a fantastic review, we certainly would appreciate that, especially if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. We're really trying to grow our presence there, and the best way for us to do that is for you guys to go out and leave us 5-star rates and great reviews. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, if you wouldn't mind just quickly sliding that finger over to 5 stars, we certainly would appreciate that. And hey, if you leave us a review on any of the review options, we just might read it in a future episode.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.